Hello everyone, welcome to your International Safety Award webinar for 2023. My name is Elaine Crean, I'm Head of Membership Events and Awards today. Today I'm also joined by Neil Stone, our Chief Adjudicator, and Christine Cadman, who's also an adjudicator. I'm going to give you a short introduction about how we're going to proceed with the webinar, and then I'll hand over to Neil and Christine a little later on. So first of all, next slide please, Susanna. Today we're going to focus mainly on the questions and how to answer the questions for your ISA applications. It'll be top line things like top pitfalls, things to watch out for, how to read the question and things to focus on. Most importantly for today, we will primarily focus on the questions. We'll have about 45 minutes running time and then 15 minutes for questions from all of you out there if you want to ask us anything in specific. Also, to let you know, we won't go through how to submit your application via Learning Zone and how to obtain licenses. We do plan to have a separate practical administration webinar later in the year or early next year, which will specifically focus on how to navigate the questions on Learning Zone. So for this morning, I just want to go through some key dates so you're all aware of the ISA 2023 schedule. First of all, we'll have a second webinar for how to answer your questions on the 12th of January. Quickly followed by the submission deadline. So all of the questions will need to be answered and your application submitted by the 10th of February. As with all other years, we have a number of free to enter awards, which you don't need to actually submit an ISA application for these awards. Anybody can enter these awards, and the closing deadline for those will be the 3rd of March. You don't need to worry about these dates. They're all listed on the BritSafe website, plus you'll receive a number of reminder emails throughout the process, and we'll keep you updated as to what the next stage is in the application process. In terms of results, we always have a lot of questions. Clients want to know when they will receive the results. You will receive your ISA results on the 10th of March in 2023. We'll publish the winners list on the website on the 11th of March. And then for any clients who wish to query their ISA result or submit for a remark, you'll have a deadline of the 24th of March. For the free to enter categories, they have a separate shortlist date. So we'll shortlist the winners, or the shortlist for the free to enter categories will be published on the 27th of April. The winners for the free to enter categories will be launched at the ISA Gala dinner on the 19th of May. So as with the Gala dinner this year, we brought back the Gala dinner after a break with the pandemic on the 23rd of June. We'll bring the Gala dinner back to its normal time, and it will be in May in 2023. So just to give you a little bit more detail about the ISA categories and how they work. Next slide, please, Susanna. So alongside our ISA awards, we will also have a number of specific sector, best in country, best in company awards. These are specifically awards for the highest scoring applications within these areas. For the best application overall, which is our Chief Adjudicator Award, we'll also have this award, and the winners for these awards will be announced at the Gala dinner on the 19th of May in 2023. So with the free to enter awards, next slide please, Susanna. We have the same list of awards as last year. Specifically though for India, we have 3 new specific India categories. So you'll have Best Contractor Safety Initiative, Best Fire Safety Initiative, and Outstanding Road Safety Initiative. You'll find details of these specific India awards on the India web pages. And Susanna will put a link in our chat area so you can see exactly where those awards are listed. Again, just to note that you don't need to submit an ISA application to enter the free to enter awards. They have a separate timetable, so you have slightly more time to enter into these categories. And again, we will send you lots of email reminders about when the awards open, when they close, and also when the shortlist will be announced. So you don't need to worry about taking down the dates or the list of free to enter categories at the moment. You'll receive lots of information about those over the next couple of months. So on to the next slide, please, Susanna. So as I mentioned earlier, we're joined today by our Chief Adjudicator, Neil Stone, and also Christine Cadman, who is part of our adjudication team. Neil and Christine are going to take you through the questions. They're going to give you advice into how to answer the question, things to watch out for, things that will help you get a distinction, etc., etc. So please do make some notes. If you do have any questions after this webinar, please do use the chat area. Put your questions in the chat area. We'll have a 15 minutes Q&A session at the end. But also Susanna will put the customer service email addresses for awards@britsafe.org for UK and international and India. They'll go in the chat area so you can make a note of those inquiry numbers as well. So hand over to you, Neil, and I'll let you go through the questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Elaine. Next slide, please, Susanna. Okay. What I'm going to do is to pick out some of the key points that the adjudicators and I noted from the applications that we received for the ICES in 2022. So these are what we regard as top tips. We're instituting a reduced word count this year, 600 words per question. You must stick to the word limit. There were certain applicants last time round who well exceeded the word count of 750, but we're going to be very, very tight in terms of the word limit. Okay, just quickly read the command word appendix before you begin, read the evidence appendix before submitting evidence, and learn about how to gain bonus marks. And I'll say a little bit more about these in a minute. Okay, next slide, please, Susanna. So this is key to your application. It's what we call what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing, and what has been the effect, what has been the impact of what you're doing. Absolutely critical to helping the adjudicators' understanding. As I said, do observe a word count, do fully read and understand the questions. The low scores that we've seen in previous years often result of applicants not properly reading, understanding the question and answering the questions. We are not looking for theoretical textbook answers. We're looking for answers in the main which relate to your organisation, into the site that you're operating. So where a question is site specific, we want to know about what you're doing at that site. Take time to review your answers. Remember, the deadline's not for another 3 months. Just don't complete your answers and put it in a drawer and don't worry about it. Do look at it, do reread it. It's worth reviewing and actually making sure that you're happy that you've done absolute justice to your organisation and your site. Questions 1 and 2, even though no marks attached to questions 1 and 2, and Christine will talk about that a little bit more in a minute, they're so important in terms of helping the judges understand the context of your work and your organisation. Only 3 questions this time round attract supplementary marks. For those who applied before, you'll recall that previously, 2022, we had 5 supplementary questions which attracted an additional mark. This time we reduced it to 3, and we try to integrate the information that we want into the question rather than you having to attach supplementary information. Where we have got a supplementary question, it's for you to attach evidence. It's not to provide another 4 or 5 pages of answers. It specifically says 1 piece of evidence. That could be a photograph, it could be a document, it could be an audit report, for example, but really focus on what you're trying to do. Remember, it's only 1 mark, whereas actually answering that specific question attracts 5 marks if you do a really good answer. That's where you're going to pick up the marks. Okay, just quickly, what we saw last year was an improvement, an increase in the number of applicants who got a distinction, and a reduction in the number of organisations who failed to get a distinction, merit or pass. We want you to succeed. We're not sitting here waiting for you to fail. We desperately want you to succeed. And what we want to do is make sure that you've got the information you need to put your organisation and your site in the best possible place to get a really good score. What we're going to do now is to go through the questions. Next slide, please, Susanna. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Christine, who will now take question 1 and 2.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, as Neil said, it's absolutely vital that you do read the full question. Question 1 asks you to describe the nature and scope of your main operational activities carried out at your site. So what is it you do? Are you, well, whatever you are, what do you do? How many people are there on site? Number of employees? What is the main function of the site? Do you have any contractors? What's your relationship to other organisations of sites? This information gives the adjudicator the opportunity to understand exactly what goes on within your organisation. But please remember, we do need to know about your site. Okay, next slide, please, Susanna. So what sort of hazards are we looking for here? Well, we're looking for what you may consider the most significant issues at your site. And it could be occupational health, it could be occupational safety, and very importantly, it could also be well-being concerns. So we need to know, I mean, you will all have done risk assessments at your sites, so you will have a very good idea of actually what the most significant issues are, the most significant hazards or significant risks within each of your sites, and we need to know what they are. Okay, these won't be marked, but these give us the absolute basis of the rest of your application. Okay, next question, Neil.
Okay, so moving on, this is the first question that attracts marks, and as you can see, a maximum of 5 marks, and if you answer it poorly, you will get no marks. But I know that you're all going to take the advice and do incredibly well, so best of luck with your application. Set out the policies, your health, safety and well-being policies currently in place at your site, and then summarise how you ensure those policies align with relevant health and safety legislation for your country. So again, that should be a fairly straightforward process, but you must set out, an integral part of this question is actually setting out how you communicate those policies to staff at your site. How do you help your staff at your site actually understand what the policies are, and specifically what their role is in making sure those policies are carried out? So it's not saying, well, we stick all our health and safety policies up on a notice board and they're there for the staff to read at the site. It's actually helping understand that you know that the staff at your site, the people working on your site, actually understand what the policies are and are playing a part in actually achieving those policy objectives. Okay, there is a supplementary, remember. Next slide, please, Susanna. There's a supplementary which is important, only 1 mark, but it's integral to the question. 3 examples of communications channels used at your site, and you should be able to do that succinctly. We're not looking for pages and pages here. What we're looking for is 3 examples of communication channels, what you do, how you do it, and how it works. Okay, could be photographs, could be documents, it could be social media, other social media, but you should be able to do that succinctly. Okay, next question, please, Susanna. Thank you. Right, this goes back to question 2. So in question 2, you've actually identified what your significant health, safety and hazards are and the well-being issues. Now, what we are saying here, and this is where a number of applicants have gone wrong in the past, what we're saying here is just identify one. A number of organisations last time and in previous years have actually picked out all of them. You've got 600 words, pick out the one that you consider to be the most significant of all the hazards and all the issues that you face, and tell us what you do. It's a case study. Tell us, bring the story, bring the risk, bring the hazard, the issue to life by telling us, make it a story that is readable so that the judges understand what you've done, how you've done it. Okay, but just one, not all three, not one from each, just one. Choose the one that's most significant, has got the best possible story to tell. Okay, I'll hand over now. Sorry, next slide, 4B. And again, this is another one that's got a supplementary mark attached to it. And detail how you assess the effectiveness of the control measures described. So you've actually said what the most significant hazard is to safety or health, or what the most significant well-being issue is. And you set out what you've done in your answer to question 4, okay? And you describe the controls that you've got in place, and then go on 4B just to say how you assess the effectiveness. Now, it could be through audit, it could be through engagement with your workforce, but just set it out very, very simply. And again, you don't need to go into pages on this, just one piece of evidence to actually highlight what you're actually doing to assess the effectiveness of that control measure. I'll hand over to Christine for questions 5 and 6. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Okay, so you've identified your hazards and risks. You've explained how effective your control measures are. Now we're looking at performance targets. So describe how your KPIs, your performance targets, are developed on your site. So how do you go about it? So you do your risk assessments, you do your audits. From those audits, you might have some control measures that you need to put in place. So from that, people will be given tasks to do, and those are their performance targets. So how does this work on your site? So all we're asking is one example of a target currently in place, and that could have been discovered through an audit or through a risk assessment that went wrong, an accident, whatever. So from that target currently in place, how is the progress of this target measured? And this is where Elaine was saying about reading every part of the question. It's quite a big question. So we need to know, first of all, what performance targets are developed, one example of a target that's actually in place, so something that might have gone wrong that is now in place, and how the progress of that target is actually measured. And again, measuring could be through audit, it could be through somebody going round with a tick list, it could be through meetings, it could be anything, but we just need to know how it is working. Okay, next slide, please, Susanna. So within your organization, you have senior executives, you have a senior leadership team, and each of these people will have key responsibilities for leading the health, safety, and well-being at your site. So first of all, we need to know who these people are. So please identify a list, is all. Identify who these people are and indeed what they do. So you may have a health and safety manager. He might be one of your senior executives. What does he or she do in the organization? What are their key responsibilities and how do they lead the health, safety and well-being at your site? How indeed do your senior executives or your leadership team actually get involved in the formulation of objectives at your site? So again, it's going back to audit and meetings and discussions and how do you form your plan of your objectives for the following year? And that's what we're looking for. But identify, notice the words, identify the members, responsibilities, and then the description of how these executives are involved in making your objectives for the following year. But remember again, please, it's at your site. Next slide, please, Susanna. Thank you.
Okay, back to me. Question 7 links very much back to what Christine has just said in terms of your answer to question 6. The British Safety Council for many, many years has promoted the importance of active leadership involvement. And by leadership, we mean the board, we mean senior directors, and we mean senior managers. And this isn't just paying lip service. We actually advocate, strongly believe, as 45,001 now makes absolutely clear, the importance of having active involvement of the top level leadership in ensuring that the health and safety goals of an organisation are met. So flowing on from question 6, what we're looking for is examples of how the senior executives' engagement activities on site are assessed and measured. So for example, it could be that your senior leadership team, and whether it's directors or senior managers, actually have got a commitment to look at audit reports and have a say in terms of ensuring that audit reports are implemented. It could be through site visits, site walks, could be through attendance at toolbox meetings. It could be looking at the results of staff survey. What mechanisms are in place for ensuring that your senior executives, your leadership team are actively engaged, and that what they're doing is contributing to good health and safety and well-being at your particular site? Next slide, please, Susanna. This is the third question, which has one mark attached to it. So this is the final question where there's one additional mark allocated, provided you provide one detailed example. So, for example, it could be that all of your senior management, your senior leadership team, have objectives in their personal work plans for health and safety engagement. If they do, then detail how that is assessed. Is it assessed by the board of directors in the case of a senior manager? In the case of directors, is it assessed by the CEO? Is it assessed by non-executive board members? Give one example. Again, you don't need to provide pages and pages. You should be able to do this succinctly in terms of providing an example. Okay. Next slide, please, Susanna. What we have been impressed by in terms of the answers that we saw last time round in ISA 2022 is the impact that COVID's had on your workplace and your workers, and the measures that you've taken in place to ensure that you kept your workplace and your workers safe, not only during the pandemic, but going forward. An awful lot of learning has come out of COVID. A lot of very, very good practice has been developed and is still very much in place. What we're not saying is that there's another pandemic just around the corner. That we don't know, but we do know in the UK that we're seeing still fairly high levels of COVID. What we're saying, what we want to know from you is what contingency arrangements you put in place to manage any future pandemic. What learning has come out of what you've seen and what you've done with COVID-19, and what changes have you made in terms of your management of health hazards at your particular site that stands you in good stead for the future? So this is forward-looking, very much forward-looking. And as I said, there's some absolute excellent examples in last year in terms of the things that you were doing to make sure that your workplace and your workers were safe. Just tell us what you're doing to ensure that should this happen again, and all the experts say it will, what arrangements you've got in place to put you in a good position to actually address that pandemic if and when it happens. Okay. Question 9 and 10, can I hand over to you, Christine?
Yes, indeed. So again, we've mentioned auditing quite a few times throughout this webinar, and here we are again with how you audit. So again, the command word is describe, which means we need to know exactly what arrangements you have in place for auditing your site's health, safety, and indeed well-being policies and procedures. Now, this could be an external audit, as you have maybe with the British Safety Council or some other organisation, hopefully the British Safety Council. but also internal auditing. So you may have a particular manager who likes to go around with a checklist and check that things are working. You may have a formal audit done on your health and safety policies, but then somebody perhaps goes around to check that those policies are actually working. So from each audit that you have, from every audit that you have, there's always going to be some sort of outcome of that audit, whether that be a positive or indeed a negative outcome. So then you would be expected to look at those outcomes, and actually in this particular question you're asked to give 3 examples of how you have implemented an audit outcome and or indeed a recommendation. But part of those examples would be exactly as Neil was saying at the very, very beginning of the webinar. What was the outcome of that? Did it work? Did your recommendation work? Because if not, then you'd obviously be going back and checking and seeing why it didn't work. So all this information, and remember please, it is your site we're looking at here, the auditing of your site, not the whole organisation. And please remember also it is health, safety and well-being policies and procedures. Thank you. Can we have the next slide please, Susanna? Okay, so as part of, again, as part of every health and safety programme, and dependent on the site that you run, there will be an element of personal protective equipment needed. So first of all, you would need to tell us, so we're going back to the beginning of the questionnaire where we asked you to describe your processes. So you have your processes in place. Give us a little bit of a detail about those processes where you would need to assess the personal protective equipment or PPE that you provide to your staff in order to prevent the risk of injury and disease and ill health. So it's all well and good potentially to, for instance, if you have a noise issue on your site, then you may possibly issue ear defenders. But do they work? Is it the right thing to do? Are you going down the hierarchy of control and checking first of all to make sure that the equipment's working properly, etc., etc. So there's quite a lot of information that would need to be put into place before you would then decide. Please remembering that PPE is usually or quite often a last resort, that PPE might be needed. But then, is it fit for purpose? In other words, does it actually work? So does the PPE that you've given, so for instance, again, going back to noise, if you've given ear defenders, do they actually work? And how would you find that out? Well, you'd probably have to do some sort of check on people's hearing to make sure it works. And then you can tick that box and say, yes, that PPE works for noise. In this area, tick the box. And those are the things we're looking for. Those are the examples that we would be asking you to provide for us. And as we said, if the PPE is not fit for purpose, then what action would you take? And that's going back to the first part we were discussing, that if the ear defenders didn't work and people were still getting problems, then you would have to look for another option, whatever that option might be. And it may not be PPE, it might be getting rid of something higher up in the hierarchy of control measures. Thank you. Next slide. Neil, is it your turn next?
Yeah, I'll do question 11 and Christine will come back for question 12 and we'll take the supplementaries together. Okay, we believe, the British Safety Council, as many of you believe, all of you hopefully, the importance of actually having procedures and processes in place that enable your workers to actually voice concerns, identify any issues that need to be brought to the attention of management concerning health, safety and well-being. It's a side of a mature organisation. That could be many different methods for doing that. It could be through a staff suggestion scheme. It could be through toolbox talks, it could be through regular briefings with staff, a whole number of mechanisms, okay, that are in place. And I'm not going to give you your 3 examples. We want to know from you what your examples are, what really works best, because it could be that you've got 10 different mechanisms in place, but you might say, well, yeah, we've got different mechanisms in place for enabling staff to actually raise any issues that they have concerning our management of health and safety. However, the examples that work best for us are A, B, and C. So think about the ones that really work best. But it's not only saying what the mechanisms are, but it's actually saying what happens. What do you do once the management or the leadership team or the supervisors who've actually had those issues raised with them, what they actually do when they've been raised. And so it's not, oh, well, we've got a mechanism where staff can go online and just tell us they've got a concern or an issue that they wish to raise. Take it through to the end so that we actually have a real sense that this is a very serious part of your management of health and safety and well-being, and you're actually addressing and taking those concerns seriously and doing something with them. And if you can provide an example, or you're being asked to provide 3 examples, think of 3 really good examples from your own experience which actually help the adjudicators to understand how that's working. Can I hand over to Christine for question 12, please? Thanks, Susanna.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, so as part of, again, at the beginning of your application, you were asked to give some examples, or should we say what contractors there actually are on your site. So you may have contractors coming in to do all sorts of different types of work on your site. They might be emergency contractors coming in because an emergency has occurred, or it might be somebody who comes in on a daily basis and is contracted to work on your site. So what we're asking for here is the arrangements, and of course, like everything else, using examples to ensure that the contractor who comes on your site complies with your organisation's health, safety and well-being policies, procedures and indeed objectives. So I am going to assume, of course, that before any contractor is allowed on site, you take notice of their policies and procedures and etc., and that they in turn will be given a copy of yours, and that also as they come onto site they are inducted onto your site and given what you expect of them, how they report things, how they behave themselves, the PPE they're expected to wear, etc., etc. But what we're asking for here are examples that you have in place to ensure that you know that these people comply with these policies. So, for example, if there had been an incident of some description, how you would actually go about examining what's gone wrong, and how you would put that right, how you would discuss this with the contractor, whether there's anything in the contractor's when they first come on site, whether you say to them, if you don't do this, you will not be allowed on site again, that sort of thing. But actual examples of something that you've had to maybe intervene to ensure that the contractor does actually comply with your organisation's health, safety and indeed well-being policies. You may even have to provide training for the contractors, and that's quite normal. Thank you, Susanna.
Next slide. Oh, right. Just before we get to questions, which Christine and I, Elaine and Susanna are very happy to take, just quickly come to the 3 additional marks that are on offer. 1 mark for a 3-star outcome of a BSc 5-star audit within the eligibility period. 2 marks where you've got a current ISO 45001 certificate, or 4-star outcome from a BSc 5-star audit, and 3 marks for a 5-star outcome from the 5-star audit. Okay, so what we saw last time round was that the overwhelming majority of applicant organisations had actually successfully gone through 45001 certification. And to get those marks, what you do is quite simply attach a copy of the certificate. We're really pleased. Yes, of course, we're going to say to you that 5-star audit is excellent, which it is. It's well regarded. It's a blue ribbon audit. But what we're pleased to see is the shift over to 45001, and the fact that so many organisations have made that move and actually got 45001 accreditation. And by having that, or the 5-star audit, what it means is that there's a hell of a lot of evidence and information there which really should be informing your answers to the question. In other words, it should make your life a whole lot easier in answering the questions and getting very, very good marks for those answers. So hopefully that was useful. The session's being recorded. If there are any questions, Christine and I would be happy to take them. Or if you're thinking about putting a question in subsequently, we'll obviously do our best to get back to you in plenty of time. But remember, you've got 3 months until the closing date. Do take that time to review your answers to your questions to make sure that you've done yourself justice in your organisation. It is worth taking the time to read and reread and review. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you found it useful.
Thanks, Neil. Now, everyone, don't be shy. We don't have any questions in the chat area. Please do post any questions. I will give you a couple of minutes to do that, to have a think about anything you might want to ask the adjudicators or myself and Susanna.
Hi, Len. Sorry, there is a question. Are you able to describe a client site rather than your own site? A lot of the work we undertake is via partner working on a customer site. So not sure how we can apply all this to our unique circumstances.
I don't think there's a problem there. If you're a contractor, for example, and Christine will come in, if you're a contractor and you're doing work at various sites, you're talking about the work that you're doing at one of your sites. Just I hope I'm answering the question properly. So say that you're a construction contractor and you're operating at 6 different sites, and that changes from month to month, year to year. Give an example, state absolutely clearly in answering questions 1 and 2 that you're talking in relation to the work that you're doing at a specific site that you're working at. It doesn't have to be your headquarters, but it has to be one where you're operating. Does that make sense, Christine?
Absolute sense, yes, that's absolutely fine. Of course, there'll be an awful lot of contractors who will be applying for this award, and yes, very important. It's vitally important that you know the site that you're working on, that you understand the hazards and risks of that site, that you know what the policies and the procedures of that site are. So the question that you've asked can very easily be answered going through the questions that we've gone through today by using that particular site. But as Neil said, do make it clear initially which site you are talking about. What we're not looking for is a generic overview of the procedures and policies that you might have back at your head office somewhere. There may be the same, it may be the same procedures and policies that occur throughout, but what we're looking for are these specific examples of the particular site and how that is managed. So yes, in answer to the question, yes, use the site that you're working at. Does that answer your question?
We do have another question. It says, how do you apply for multi-site, or would you just use the headquarters? So for this,
I would urge you, if you're a big contractor, you've got to, this is a decision for you to make as an organization. If you say, right, we're a big organization, we've got 10 different sites, we want to apply for an award for 5 of the 10 sites, that's open for you to do. If you want to apply just for 1, that's your choice. If you want to apply for 5, that's your choice. If you want to do all 10, that's your choice. I'm not ignoring the question or pretending to get off the hook here. What I'm saying to you is, as an organization, you've got to decide how important it is for the individual sites to apply for this award. Do you think it's important for, say, if you're operating at 10 sites, all 10 to apply? Because you might get different results. It could be that if you have all your 10 sites applying, some may get a distinction, some may get a merit, some may get a pass. Hopefully they'll all pass, but you might see a difference. So there is a benefit in doing applications for specific sites within your organization than just one application. You know, you might say, well, that's going to cost more money, but the fact is, what it does, it enables you to subject your management of health and safety and well-being at those sites to the awards process. And you know, it could be that the judges will take a very different view about how your sites are doing in terms of managing hazards at those specific sites. So I hope that's not a too long-winded answer, but if it was me and I was in an organization with a number of different sites, providing you felt that they were all up to the mark, I would submit separate applications, solely because I think that there's very different issues. Yes, it's good for the organization overall to be successful, but I do think that really there's a separate issue of here in terms of actually seeing the differences between the different sites. Okay, that's what I think, but you know, Christine may have a different view.
No, I haven't exactly that view. What we really don't want to see are a number of applications submitted with exactly the same information on them, which doesn't really work. So if you're describing a particular incident or a particular hazard, and that hazard then appears in exactly the same way on all the applications, then it's not what we're looking for. So it would be fantastic to actually put an application in for every site, and to actually then to show the level and the depth of your health, safety and welfare policies and how they work at each individual site. And that in itself will enable you as an organisation to level off your health, safety and welfare throughout your organisation. Does that answer your question?
One of the things that we try to do is that if an organisation submits a number of applications, we try to do our best to ensure that the same judge is judging all those applications in terms of consistency. So if an organisation says we're going to submit 5 different applications for different sites, we try to make sure it's the same judge who actually judges all those to ensure that there is consistency across the applicant sites.
Another question.
Any more?
Yes.
Just to add on to that, sorry, just to add on to that, we do absolutely understand that the high-level procedures and policies coming from perhaps your head office will be the same. What we'd be looking for within individual sites are the processes and how you put them in place and how you deal with any issues that might occur. So the actual specific site issues based on the overhead policies.
We do have another question. Can you kindly elaborate on the two additional marks as mentioned by Neil for the ISO 45001 certification for any particular organization?
Okay, this is where it does get a bit complicated. So if we're talking solely about ISO 45001, the reality is, and we know this, is that sometimes that 45001 certification relate to your organization rather than a specific site. That is perfectly legitimate. We will give 2 marks if you've got 45,001 across the whole organisation. It doesn't have to be for that specific site, because that's the way that 45,001 operates. However, we can't give marks where you say, well, we've applied for 45,001, but we're waiting for the results. We've got to see the certificate. And in many cases, and we saw this very, very clearly in 2022, ISA, was that a number of organisations were submitting certificates across their whole organisation. And on that basis, we give a benefit of the doubt and we award the 2 marks because we're not mean.
Also, we do have a question about the attachment. Are attachment permitted for the main question or just the supplementary ones?
Yeah, I mean, the supplementary, sorry, the main questions, we want to see text, we want to see words. The supplementary, the 3 supplementary answers that we're looking for, then you can provide evidence. It could be a photograph, it could be a document, it could be a certificate, it could be a training log, it could be many things. For the actual substantive questions where there's a supplementary, we want to see textual answers, not photographs or certificates. We need to have an argued textual answer.
Yeah, just to add to that, the supplementary evidence is in support of the answer that you've already given, as opposed to instead of.
There's a question about length of answers. Do you just want to cover the word count again?
Yeah, okay. 600 is the limit. We have to make a decision, and we will be advised by the British Safety Council what happens if someone goes over that limit. What should happen is that if you exceed the limit, and there's no good reason why you've exceeded the limit, then we will not mark that question. We can have mechanisms in place for enabling us to actually count the number of words that you provide in answers. I've got to say, and I said this in my report last year, there were some organisations that really overstepped the mark. And I think I quote one example. One question had 5,500 words as an answer. There is a reason for 600 words as the limit, and that is that you multiply that by 12, and that's 7,500 words approximately. You know, that is an awful lot of work for an adjudicator to do. Christine and I, we marked somewhere in the region of 90 applications each, as did a number of the other judges, plus additional applications that we reviewed. This process takes time. We believe, and you can argue the point, and we'd be happy to have that argument with you quite separately, if you can't provide the evidence in 600 words to the questions that we posed, then how many words do you need? We believe that it's perfectly possible, feasible to provide a succinct answer which says the why, how, sorry, that what you did, why you did it, how you did it, and to what impact in 600 words. We believe that. If there is a strong feeling coming out of applicants that we've been unfair and that we really need to review that word limit, we'll come back to it next year. We believe that 600 words is fair, reasonable, and should enable applicant organisations to do themselves justice. Christine?
Yes, absolutely agree. And we've seen some excellent applications in the past, absolutely sticking to the word count, with every piece of information that we need within that. What we don't negatively mark, incidentally, so if you do put a lot of information in there, we won't knock marks off, but as Neil said, we'll have a cut-off point, but we will. The thing is that what you want to do is make your point as succinctly and clearly as possible, and you can't really do that if you use just far too many words. So again, as Neil said at the beginning, read your application. Have you actually answered the question? Have you actually given the succinct answer that is required? or have you gone off on a different tangent and started to put other stuff into it that isn't needed? Okay.
There's another question about multi-site submissions. I think it's just clarity about somebody who has 5 projects under their company name. So can we just run through multi-site applications again?
Okay. Well, it's a decision that the organisation's got to make. If they've got 5 sites, yes. If they want to put in 1 application just for the organisation, then they're perfectly at liberty to do so. However, they've got to give examples. They have got to give evidence answering the questions which are site specific. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to us. So, if they've got 5 sites and they just want to make 1 application, they've got to make sure that the judges understand that when they're giving evidence that they're referring to site A or site B. That's okay. We can understand that. We can cope with that. However, that will be that will be an award made to the organisation. That will not be an award made to the organisation's 5 sites. So it's not going to be, we are giving an International Safety Award for the organisation and 5 separate awards to each site. If the organisation wants to apply for the sites, it's got to submit 5 applications. If it wants to apply for 1 organisation as an overarching an award, it's just 1 award, and we will just be making 1 award, and that be to the organisation. But if the organisation wants the award given to specific sites, and it's going to have to submit specific applications, separate applications for the site. And I hope I didn't make that sound too complicated.
Yeah, I think that sounds straightforward, Neil. We have another question about confidentiality. Obviously, there are quite a lot of confidentiality, secrecy around different contractors, law contractors. And I think the concern is mainly about the information submitted within an application and how confidential it is kept.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll answer this and Chris can come in if she's got anything to add. What we see as judges remains between us and the applicant organisation. We have access to the applications when we're scoring, and once we finished our scoring, that's it. We do not have we do not keep any of the data, any of the information. So, for example, all the applications that I marked last year, yes, I had access to your application and your data and your information at that time. I have not now got application to that information. I've got no copies of that information, no copies of the application form. All I've got is a notebook, and it's like a table which actually lists the organisation name and the points that I've given you for each question. The judges, one of the things that we attach great importance to is not only the expertise and knowledge of the judges, but their integrity. This is not a route in for the judges to say, oh, that looks useful. I think I'll get in touch with that company, for example, because they're doing some interesting things and there might be some business there for me. This is specifically the information that the judges have relates solely to the awards, and we are bound by confidentiality. I can't talk about any, I see some wonderful examples of what organisations are doing, but I've got no right, I've got no ability. I can't say I'm going to write a piece for a publication and actually quote that organisation because of confidentiality and privacy. That's not the deal. The deal is, if, for example, we feel that one of the distinction winners or one of sector winners is doing a really good job, and it'd be great to publicise that, there's no way that's going to be done without the British Safety Council getting back to that organisation and saying, we'd like to talk to you about your application, or we'd like to publicise the application. So the only thing that comes out of the applications that goes public are the results which go on the BSC website and appear in safety management. But other than that, the judges are not free to use the evidence that they see as they will. The information is confidential and it's private. Christine?
Yes, absolutely. I've been with the British Safety Council as an adjudicator for a number of years now, and that is absolutely one of the main points, that everything is confidential. And as an examiner, as an adjudicator, we only see the applications that we're allotted, we don't see everybody else's. So if I'm given 50 applications to mark, and those are the ones that I will see, and as Neil so rightly said, once I've marked those, then that information has gone from my computer. I don't keep a record of it either. Confidentiality is absolutely first and foremost in all the adjudicators, so you can be rest assured.
And we haven't got any relationship with respective regulators, so it's not as though we've got a contact in the UK with the Health and Safety Executive, or in other countries of the regulators there. That's not a relationship we have in relation to these awards. These awards are self-standing.
Okay, thanks, Neil and Christine. I'm going to move to the next question because I think it might be a big one. What's the big difference between a distinction answer and a merit answer?
You might get different answers from Chris and me, but we'll try and do our best. Chris?
Right, okay. We have different bands, as you've seen from the questions, as to where we place our marks. There will be a excellent response, there will be a very good response, satisfactory response, or less than satisfactory response. So if you want to get into the distinction area, then what you'd be looking for is, again, as Elaine has already said, and as Neil has already said, that you answer every part of the question, that you provide the evidence that's asked, that you go back over the question yet again and ensure that if it says explain, that you have explained, that you've given specific examples, and if you've done all of that, then you will get into the distinction range of marks. As Neil has already said, we want you to come out on top. We want you to succeed. When we look at an application, we get I would groan if I can see the question hasn't been answered properly, or something's been missed out and you think, why? Because if you've missed a part of the question out, you won't get a distinction. So if you've missed, if you haven't put an example, well, you're automatically going to be down lower than a distinction. So all I can say is please read every part of the question. Remember, there are more than one part. There might be 3 or 4 or even 5 parts to any single question, where it might say identify, explain, give examples, give a list, whatever it is, then please do it, and then you will get your distinction.
If you look at the analysis that I included in my report for last year, 20% of applicants got a distinction. Now, if you said, well, where is the band drawn between a merit and a distinction, or a pass and a merit? That is a decision made by the executive of the British Safety Council once all the marking's completed, on the basis of our advice to the executive of the British Safety Council. Just sort of bringing it back down to earth, what it means is, say for last year, I'll quote an example. So last year, the maximum possible marks you could get were 50 plus 5 supplementary plus 3 if you'd come through 5-star, or 2 if you'd got ISO 45001. So that's 58 maximum. And you got a distinction if you got 51 marks, 50 plus marks. So you could drop 8 marks across all the answers and yet still get a distinction. The band will be determined, as I said, by the executive, but it is perfectly feasible. If 1 in 5 organisations got a distinction last time round, then it is not impossible to do. But you've got to be consistent, across all of the questions, because if you have 1 bad answer or 2 bad answers, it really could jeopardise your chance of getting a distinction. So we want you to succeed. We're not looking to mark you down. We're looking for you to succeed. But what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that not only do you review all of your answers, but even the answers you feel, oh, I could have done a little bit better on that, or not absolutely sure about that, make sure that you're absolutely consistent across the 12, the 12 questions and the 10 questions that attract marks. Make sure that you're consistent in terms of the quality of your answers, because you don't want to have one or two dodgy answers that mean that your score's knocked down.
Thanks so much, Neil. I just want to draw the webinar to a close. We're now at 11 a.m. here in London. So thanks so much to everybody for all of their questions. If there are any questions we didn't get to, we'll pop them in an email. And just to reiterate in terms of the deadlines, we will have another webinar on the 12th of January. Someone asked about the ISA closing deadline. This is the 10th of February. For the free to enter awards, it's the 3rd of March. You can find all of these dates on the website, and we will of course be sending out reminder emails. So the recording for this webinar will be available via YouTube. We'll send an email out to everyone once that is ready. But without further ado, thank you so much to Neil and Christine today. Thank you all for attending. Best of luck with your applications, and do keep in touch. If you have any questions, please do get in touch with the staff here at British Safety Council. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a good rest today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good luck.